The mayor has complete power over the establishment, maintenance, and command of the police department. The mayor may make all rules and regulations and may promulgate and enforce general and special orders necessary to operating the police department. Except where the law vests an appointment in the department itself, the mayor appoints and may discipline and discharge any employee in the department. This is from the Charter of the City of Minneapolis, Section 7. Police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police only being members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interests of community welfare and existence. That's the seventh principle of Sir Robert Peel, who was considered the father of modern policing. As a city, we have to acknowledge that policing is a serious profession. It has subtleties, it has complexities, and to us outside of the profession, they are not immediately evident. And we shouldn't pretend to know more about medicine than the doctor. Nonetheless, we must also acknowledge that policing is a public service. It is irrevocably subject to the people of the city it serves. The doctor works without question at the behest of the patient. And we have every reason to be concerned with our treatment. We have recently witnessed the loss of Justine Damon. And before that, we saw the loss of Philando Castile at our borders. And we have lost many more before him in conditions that are well worthy of scrutiny. It is callous to call these deaths unnecessary because there is no such thing as a necessary death. And in matters of incomprehensible loss like this, it's better to remain silent. Our problem in policing isn't limited to officer-related shootings. We have a violent crime crisis that has been building up over the past 4 years. In the first 6 months of this year alone, our city has suffered 18 homicides, 123 gunshot wounds, 267 acts of rape, 720 weapons violations, 875 robberies of persons, and 1,100 cases of aggravated assault. We make over 400,000 calls to our police department each and every year. That's more than 1,000 a day. Any talk of major reform that ignores this reality, this spike in violent crime in our city, is ultimately useless. We don't need to dismantle, dismember, or destroy the police force. What we need is an effective police force, a force that is both professional and compassionate, disciplined and adaptable, productive and accountable. And to that end, I, Aswar Rahman, propose the following reforms. Some are cultural, some are procedural. All are to be enacted under the full authority of the office of the Mayor of Minneapolis, empowered in our charter with the complete power over the establishment, maintenance, and command of the police department. With that, I'll start the 14 reforms of the Minneapolis Police Department. The first reform is in civilian oversight. Review panels will be reformed in my administration to give civilians the majority vote. Review panels per our city's charter currently consist of 2 officers and 2 civilians. And this allows for gridlock, which favors an accused officer and undermines the unquestionable civilian authority of the police department. By reforming the system and adding a civilian member to the review panel, the judgment of the civilian representatives will ultimately win the day. Now, some might ask, why not eliminate officers from this review board altogether? Well, the sworn officers on the panels are usually high-ranking officers, and they do provide valuable insight to the process of policing, and removing them completely would rob the civilian panelists of an important source to fairly assess submitted complaints. Some might say, well, then why not just keep 1 police officer? And to that, we have 2 officers because that will better balance out each other's views. A sole representative of the Minneapolis Police Department carries its own risk because on the panel, they may not have the adequate information for each complaint, or worse, they might provide misinformation. The goal is to affirm civilian control of policing in our city. Receiving a majority vote on the review panel is crucial in guaranteeing the unconditional civilian oversight of our police department. This reform will require cooperation with the City Council. to make changes to the charter. And in the unlikely event of stiff resistance from the council, I will create a special civilian commission solely under the auspices of the mayor's office to review any and all complaints, thereby circumventing gridlock in the Office of Police Conduct Review and reaffirming full civilian authority of the police. The second reform is in mayoral authority. We must exercise mayoral authority to discipline and dismiss consistently unprofessional officers when traditional routes fail. Time and time again, officers who are simply unfit for the job are kept in their positions and allowed to do more harm by the simple lack of anyone willing to stand up and take responsibility for their discipline or even dismissal. And in this cultural reform within city government, the mayor will assert their chartered authority to appoint and discipline or discharge any employee in the department. The third reform is in mayoral advocacy. In situations of disagreement between police and civilians, the mayor will be an advocate of the civilians involved. As the mechanism of our city government works by and large in favor of accused police officer, it is now necessary that the mayor's office embrace its role as the representative of the people of Minneapolis. While all measures of fairness will be taken, it is crucial that the mayor take any and all concerns and complaints of civilians at their full value. And in practice, this will mean that any and all civilian complaints will be assumed by the mayor's office to be valid and true. And the mayor will be obligated to pursue these complaints to vindication unless the MPD can demonstrate illegitimacy of a complaint. And this shifts the burden of proof on the service, not the citizen, something that is crucial towards building a more effective and accountable MPD. The fourth reform is in data access and transparency. The Minneapolis Police Department will partner with the University of Minnesota to make all legally shareable policing data accessible and comprehensible to all Minneapolitans. The MPD will create a partnership with the U of M, and if they are unable or unwilling, another academic institution or nonprofit will be engaged with a similar capacity. The MPD will provide the partner with direct, unhindered access to all shareable data. It will be the academic partner's responsibility to make the data fully accessible to all members of the public, and the emphasis will always be towards accessibility and clarity. Currently, the data that is publicly available is vague and designed more for statisticians rather than the average citizen. This procedural change will ensure that all people in Minneapolis will have the data necessary to hold their police department accountable. Now, we will earmark funding within the general public safety budget for this program because fundamental transparency coupled with access and comprehensibility will ensure civilian control of the police department. The fifth reform is in whistleblowing. The mayor's office will maintain a direct, confidential whistleblower route from any sworn officer to the office itself. It is necessary to have an inviolable route of complaint from within the police department. While some mechanisms exist within the MPD now, it is necessary to have a reliable route to complain to the civilian authority of the police department, and that is the mayor's office. And in a change that's partly procedural and partly cultural, a secure route of reporting flaws within the MPD will be set up that goes directly to the mayor, who will then take further actions on this confidential complaint, always maintaining anonymity. It is the hope that this route won't need to be used often, but it is crucial that it exists to provide a safe way for dedicated officers who genuinely want to see progress within their department to report problems within the organization that they serve. The sixth reform is in the non-lethal branch. A new non-lethal branch, we'll call it the NLB, will be formed within the Minneapolis Police Department to be used for low-risk calls. NLB officers will be dispatched to address non-violent disturbed persons calls, noise complaints, conflict resolutions, harassment reports, crisis interventions, suicide threats, minor vehicular accidents, public drunkenness, illegal camping, custody disputes, parking complaints, and other quality of life issues. The NLB will be specifically geared to handle situations that require de-escalation. The NLB will begin as a specialized task force, not to number more than 5% of the sworn officers in the police department. Its effectiveness will be fully evaluated after 2 years, at which time the NLB will hopefully merit greater investment and personnel growth. All NLB officers will be licensed peace officers and possess social training and possess social work training. My mistake. Recruitment from the NLB will be focused within the city of Minneapolis. And as another note, the NLB will wear colors that distinguish it from the regular force so as to help create a distinct identity and help in the de-escalation process for situations where they are sent. Now, it's not uncommon for a mere presence of an armed sworn officer to be a cause of greater tension, so the NLB will be instrumental in mitigating unwanted intensification. The seventh reform is in mental wellness. All MPD personnel in a supervisory role will receive advanced training in detecting debilitating stress or trauma in the officers they oversee. The relationship between a sworn officer and their supervisor offers a unique chance to ensure mental wellness of all officers. Supervisors will be provided with advanced knowledge and resources to detect stress and trauma in their officers and will be educated on the best routes within the department to help their officers for whom they are responsible. Now, policing is a tough job. It naturally attracts tough people who are less likely to admit or even notice serious mental stress or damages to their mental health. We need a mechanism to ensure that all officers who take to the street in Minneapolis are in good mental health, and supervisor training is central to that end. Continuing with mental well-being within the police department, we will establish for the eighth reform rotating light work positions in each precinct to be made available to officers experiencing that debilitating stress and trauma. Each police precinct will have a set of positions deliberately designed to provide officers a needed break from on-the-ground activities. These will be elective, but officers may be recommended to them by their supervisors. Without a reliable refuge from constant stress, we are only creating opportunities for mistakes and unprofessionalism. And due to the high-stress nature of the work that they do, it is important that we establish these temporary light work positions for any officers who may need it. The ninth reform is in training. The MPD will embrace a doctrine of constant training. Policing is not immune from the extreme pace of progress in the modern era, so the Minneapolis Police Department will adopt a doctrine of constant training for all its officers. So all officers, veteran and new, will expect training and retraining as much a part of their job as their actual time on the ground or at the desk. Now, if this requires employing a few more officers to ensure that ground presence is always strong, well, then money will be allocated in the budget. It is crucial that our police have the finest training in the world. In practice, this will mean that instead of reactive training for new incidents, the professional year for a police officer will already accommodate substantial time that's set aside for training and retraining. A sizable percentage of an officer's work month will be dedicated to these trainings and retrainings. And the curriculum will be built on consultation with experts and sworn officers themselves. It is important that we have a police department that is constantly evolving and changing. Embracing constant training allows for exponentially greater opportunities for innovation and modern methods of de-escalation, trauma-informed interrogation, and the like. The 10th reform is in liability insurance. The city will end self-insurance in my administration and require liability insurance for every single police officer. Now, the current system we have has the incentives all wrong because the city insures itself. So it has to fight tooth and nail to prevent any legal action against officers regardless of how blatant officers' conduct might have been. This violates not only objectivity, but civil rights, and ultimately it undermines the effectiveness of our police department. And by requiring standard professional liability insurance for all officers, the same that's required of nurses, barbers, and just about every other profession, our city will essentially move the financial risk of misconduct to an insurance firm, because that's what they exist for. Now, this will allow for objective and honest exercises of justice. The city will subsidize the starting rate of insurance for all officers. Only officers with repeated and proven violations will pay out of pocket, in proportion to the number and severity of unprofessional acts on their record. The 11th reform is in a residency credit. Officers will be financially incentivized to live in the city that they serve. The average large police department has 40% of its officers living in the community that they serve. Minneapolis, on the other hand, stands at 5%. Now, this massive imbalance of resident officers and non-resident officers creates a culture that is very much non-resident. Now, whereas a resident culture would take into account a deep personal knowledge of the city, non-resident culture is more likely to promote an occupational mindset. And this results in hostility between residents and the police department at large. State law prohibits police employment based on residence, and therefore the best route to moving the MPD towards a high residency rate is a housing credit. Officers who live in the city they serve will receive a sizable financial credit to be used for their housing costs. Now, this can take the form of a property tax reduction or even exemption, but exact methods will be decided after consulting with budgetary experts and the officers themselves. The 12th and 13th reforms are in local recruitment. The 12th reform is that the MPD will launch an employment program for 15 to 20-year-old residents in Minneapolis. The program will be modeled after the Step Up Youth Employment Program, but will run all 12 months out of the year. While school is in session, employment will be limited to after-school hours, but during the summer, available hours will increase. The young people employed by this program will be Minneapolis residents, and they will work in community outreach, digital campaigns for the department, and similar positions. The long-term health of our police department relies on cultivating qualified and motivated officers from within the city, whose upbringing in the city would provide them with a deep understanding of the community of Minneapolis. Employing young people in Minneapolis is a crucial investment in creating a strong pool of applicants for future recruitment. The 13th reform is that the mayor's office will launch a mass, sustained awareness campaign on police recruitment in Minneapolis' public high schools. We must increase awareness of policing as a career and open up the route to the MPD for all young people of the city. As mayor, I will personally speak annually at every single one of the public high schools in Minneapolis to espouse the need of the city for great policing. And I will invite sworn officers to speak about their own experiences and about the nature of their job. Early exposure to policing as a career will pay dividends in the near future as more young people in Minneapolis begin training to join the department and create a strong, highly qualified pool of applicants. The 14th reform is in mayoral responsibility. The mayor must take official responsibility for the condition and actions of the Minneapolis Police Department. As it stands in our city, it is unclear who in reality is responsible for the MPD. Blame is shifted to individual officers. In extreme cases, the chief of police is pointed to as ultimately responsible. And there is an answer to this. The person who, without question according to our city charter, is responsible for the Minneapolis Police Department is the mayor of Minneapolis. This last reform is a major cultural shift at City Hall that will stop this blame game and instead allow us as a city to honestly develop better ways of policing. Failures within the MPD will be the mayor's office failures, and on the other side of the coin, the functioning of a brilliant, innovative police department will also be to the mayor's credit. These are the 14 reforms I proudly present as the centerpiece of my campaign's public safety plan. All ideas presented are the result of thorough discussion with my team, but I take full individual responsibility as the final author of this plan. I am sure that many of you will disagree with me, and I'm sure there are flaws in this plan as there are flaws in every plan. But at the very least, we have a plan. And most will agree that this is a plan that is rational, progressive, and just as important, actionable. I look forward to evolving our strategy through further discussion. We do not have a perfect police department, and we might always be a work in progress. But that's exciting to a person like me, because I see the opportunities that we have to build on. And all that we need is energy and boldness in our civic leaders, something that I'll bring to you in spades. All steps forward must be in good faith, for sustainable reform of the mayor's office has to engage in full, candid consultation with community groups and the MPD's official structure itself. In cases of redundancy with existing similar programs, we will combine the strengths of both the existing and the proposed new program. And ultimately, we must acknowledge that a real source of public safety is a happy and prosperous citizen body. Limiting opportunity is one of the surest ways to disadvantage people in our justice systems. Not to mention, crime thrives in poverty. We need to invest in early childhood care. We need to invest in expanding tuition-free higher education and job training. My administration will work tirelessly on those. And it is crucial to set ourselves up in the police department on the right track over these next 4 years. Because this reform plan isn't enough to solve all the problems of our city, but it is a crucial part of the genuine progress we can bring in the coming 4 years. I look forward to discussing these reforms and improving this plan, and I thank you all for your time. This November, vote Aswar for mayor. Thank you. All right, let's do some questions. All right. Dave, I know you'll have 1,000. There you go. So the question is, will the NLB be required to carry liability insurance as well? And absolutely. So they will be in the same category as somebody who is a new recruit in the police department, who will pay for their standard rate. So that's a major part of this self-insurance, or getting rid of self-insurance, is we'll pay the standard rate that a officer will have for this liability insurance. It will, in the long run, still cost way less than self-insuring ourselves. Because an NLB officer can still commit misconduct. I mean, it's not a weapon by itself isn't the thing that makes a bad officer do something negative. It's weapons are dangerous. So even non-lethal weapons and like anything like mace or baton can also be used for very negative things. So yes, NLB officers will absolutely also be insured.
Yeah. Aren't we endangering our police by sending them into situations unarmed?
Yep. So absolutely. If we are to, like one of the statistics I read out, there were over 700 weapons that were recovered in the city of Minneapolis that were illegally obtained or had some kind of violation related to them. So it's not hard to imagine that maybe one or two or a few of the people with those 700 illegal guns might have felt like using them on an officer who was unarmed. So that is exactly why the NLB, the non-lethal branch, will be only sent into situations that are explicitly nonviolent. So if we have something like a minor traffic accident, we can say safely that that is not going to turn into a shootout. So in these situations that are explicitly nonviolent, that's where the NLB will be sent. Our standard sworn officers with the weapon on them will still be a crucial part, especially because of this rise in violent crime that we have in our city and the unfortunate fact that in this city we probably have more guns than people. So to balance the reality of the situation with how we need to progress as a department, the NLB will be separate and only sent to non-violent situations. Absolutely. So the question is, how with this awful condition of addressing sexual crime on university campuses and the track record of our police departments not handling them properly, how will our plan work well towards it? So that is where the NLB is going to be crucial, in that here we have an explicitly non-immediately violent situation. The people who would be addressing them wouldn't be the same sworn police officer who is trained to tackle violent crime. It would be somebody who's informed in trauma-informed interviewing, somebody who has a social work background, which is one of the requirements of belonging to the NLB. So it would be somebody going in with a completely different tone than how it is now, because as our police officers are now, I mean, the same way we handle a traffic accident, you know, who was there, what happened, what angle did the cars come from, that kind of approach to a sexual assault situation is not applicable. It is much more of, there's much more ambiguity involved, and there's oftentimes like the information isn't as clear. So that's where we need people who are qualified, who are trained in understanding sexual assault situations to be sent in, and the NLB will be people who are more in that side of the equation than traditional sworn police officers, who that really isn't their specialty, and nor should it be. That's a good question. The question is, okay, so am I worried this will take up too much of my time as mayor? Absolutely not. So this is one of the mayor's two key responsibilities. This is something worth every single second we can spend on it. I mean, this is something worth going deep into the weeds for, because we need genuine reform in our police department. We need to emphasize the things that are working. We need to figure out what's not working. And if that takes all the time in the world, I'm looking forward to drinking a lot of coffee.
Against civilian homes and vehicles.
Absolutely. So,
especially targeted on a more racial bias.
On a racial bias. See, theoretically, we should have a system in place for already taking care of that, right? If somebody has something, if they get illegally searched, whether on their person, whether in their house, especially if they're from a minority group, they should have an existing route, which should be the Civilian Review Board. But like I said, our panels are set up in such a way that if there's any gray area, that because it's two officers and it's two civilians, it just doesn't get sent any further on the review process. So my concern with illegal actions by police officers, when they happen, is that we must have a civilian majority board reviewing this, because that person like that, maybe they get away with once, but never twice or three times, because they would be held accountable, which is not something that happens now on account of the gridlock we have in our review boards.